I want to write to you about something you saw in your garden. The crows plural moving on one spot. Diving and circling, calling in that hard repetitive voice they use when something is wrong. Maybe it was near your hedge. Maybe over a corner of the flower bed where the ivy gets thick. You stood there for a moment trying to decide whether to intervene. And trying first to understand what you were looking at. That's the moment this letter is about. It probably didn't feel like a video. It felt more like watching something you weren't sure you should be watching. And the question you were carrying, even if you didn't put it into words, was something like this. What are they doing? And is there a reason to pay closer attention than usual? The answer matters more than most people assume. It deserves some time. There is an interpretation of what you saw that comes easily, and it's worth naming before moving past it. The interpretation is that the crows were being aggressive for no good reason. That they had picked on something smaller, or something asleep, or something that didn't deserve it, and that what you were watching was a kind of bullying. But set that interpretation down at least for a moment and consider another one. Because among the researchers who have studied this behavior carefully, when crows commit to mobbing something at ground level or in a low hedge, they are almost always responding to something. Not always something dangerous to you, but something. The question worth holding is not whether they are being mean. It is what they have found. Researchers use the word mobbing for what you saw, and you may have come across it before in the context of crows chasing hawks across an open sky. That kind of mobbing is the famous version. What happens in your garden is a quieter relative of it, and in some ways a more interesting one. Garden-level mobbing happens when crows detect a threat that is not above them, but among them. Something at the height of a fence post. Something tucked into a hedge. Something on the ground that doesn't belong. Or that belongs, but is in a place where it shouldn't be. Crows are very good at noticing this kind of out-of-place thing. Partly because they spend a lot of their day surveying the small territories they care about. And partly because they have long memories for what each part of their neighborhood is supposed to look like. John Marsloff and others at the University of Washington have written extensively about how attentive crows are to small changes in their environment. The detail I keep coming back to when thinking about what your crows were doing is that they don't seem to mob lightly. The energy cost is real. The exposure is real. When a group of crows commits to working a single spot for 10 or 15 or 30 minutes, they have a reason. The reason may not be one we would have prioritized, but it is a reason. Back to your specific situation for a moment. The thing that makes garden-level mobbing different from the hawk version is that the threat is by definition low. It is at eye level or below. And eye-level threats for crows include a much wider range of things than what threatens them from the sky. There may have been a cat. Cats are statistically one of the most common targets of low mobbing in American neighborhoods, both because they are present in numbers and because they kill a great many songbirds and young crows each year. The crows know this. They respond accordingly. There may have been a snake. In parts of the country where rat snakes and king snakes climb, a snake working its way through a hedge looking for nests is exactly the kind of slow, hidden, hard-to-see threat that crows are built to expose. The mobbing voice tells other crows where to look. It also tells the snake that it has been seen, which sometimes is enough to make the snake leave. There may have been an owl. This is the one people miss most often, because owls during the day sit very still and look like part of the bark. A screech owl tucked into the cleft of a tree 8 feet up can pull a mobbing crowd that lasts an hour. If you didn't see one, that doesn't mean there wasn't one. It means owls are very good at not being seen. There may have been an injured or dying animal of some kind. A young raccoon that came down too early. A rat that was already in trouble. The line between mobbing and what looks like attacking in these cases can be uncomfortable to watch, and I won't pretend otherwise. I want to pause here because there's something to address before going any further. Not everything that looks like mobbing is mobbing, and it matters that you have a way of telling these things apart. Sometimes what you are seeing is a feeding conflict. 2 or 3 crows working a piece of food posturing at each other. making short flights, calling in shorter bursts than mobbing calls. The energy is different. There's no fixed focal point. The birds are looking at each other more than they are looking at the ground. If the calling stops as soon as the food is gone, what you watched was a feeding conflict, not a mobbing. Sometimes what you are seeing is play, especially with young crows in summer. Juveniles will dive at things that aren't real threats. They will harass a squirrel or a cat that is well out of range, or even an inanimate object for what looks like the sheer practice of it. Play mobbing tends to be sloppier. The birds disengage easily. They come back, but without the same urgency. And sometimes, what you are seeing is a real mobbing event. The cues based on what researchers like Kaylee Swift have written about, and on what years of watching tend to show are these: the birds focus on one spot. They keep returning to it even when their attention is interrupted. The calls are the harsh, repeated, structured kind, not the conversational rattles. Other crows arrive over time. The whole event has a center of gravity, and the center doesn't move or moves slowly, because the thing they are mobbing is mostly stationary. If what you saw had a fixed center, and the crows kept coming back to it, and the calls were the harsh, sustained kind, you were probably watching a real mobbing, which means something was there. There's another piece worth sharing with you, because you may be wondering what to do next time. The honest answer is less than you might think. The first thing to do, if you can, is to observe from a distance, not from the spot the crows are mobbing, from wherever you happen to be, with the same patience you would bring to watching a slow scene unfold in a film. Watch where the birds are diving. Watch the angle of their attention. Crows, when they mob, tend to converge their gaze on the threat. You can sometimes triangulate. The threat is wherever their faces keep returning to. If after a minute or two of watching you can see what is there, you have your answer. If you cannot see what is there and the mobbing continues, the most likely possibilities in rough order are these: a cat under a shrub, an owl on a branch, a snake in the ivy, or an injured animal hidden in cover. Each of these calls for a different response, and the specifics depend on your region and your situation. Reaching out to your local wildlife resources is a better move than taking instruction from a letter. What I want to say plainly is that you should not approach a snake you can't identify. You should not try to handle a sick or injured animal yourself. You should not climb after an owl. The crows have a job, and they are doing it. Near the end of this letter, back to where it started, you were standing in your garden, and the crows were committing to a single spot, and you didn't know whether what you were watching was a problem, or a normal thing, or something else entirely. What's worth taking from this is a small shift in how you frame the question. The crows in your garden, when they mob, are doing a kind of work you can borrow from. They are pointing, not at you, and not for you exactly, but at something real. If you are willing to slow down and look where they are looking, you will see things in your garden that you would not otherwise see. Sometimes those things are unsettling. Sometimes they are interesting. Sometimes they leave quietly once they realize they have been exposed, which is in a way the point of the whole exercise. So the next time the crows in your neighborhood gather in one spot of your garden and start calling in that particular voice, nothing dramatic is needed from you. Just pause. Look where they are looking. Accept that they are usually right about something being there, even when you can't see it at first. Remember that the mobbing will end, the threat will resolve one way or another, and your part in it is mostly the part of someone who happened to be paying attention. That is in the end what this letter is asking of you, to pay attention. The crows have been doing it longer than we have, and they are better at it than we are. The most any of us can do is follow their gaze for a little while and learn what we are able to learn.